Hello and welcome to another Demystified with David. Today I want to talk about what life is like as an undiagnosed autistic person and how it relates to the constant feeling of stress that so many autistic people feel when they enter adulthood. While my family knew that I was autistic from a young age, they were unable to access a diagnosis for me until I was an adult. My mother worked with autistic people, but she was told she was an over anxious mother with too much knowledge of the subject. I was privileged that my mother and sister were safe people for me, but unfortunately, what I found was that when I went out into the wider world, there was constant questions about why I was the way I was. I was constantly asked about the way I communicated. You talk too loudly, you're too rude, you're too blunt, you use too long of words. Literally everything that could be picked apart about my communication was picked apart. At school, I was observably different to the other boys, and as a result, I was bullied horrifically, like a lot of autistic people are. And the problem was that the teachers didn't help. They told me that because I was a boy who was into dance like ballet and tap dance and not into football, and because I had an interest in playing musical instruments rather than typical boy things, they felt it was my own fault I was being bullied, and that if I didn't want to be bullied, I should act more like the other children. Now, obviously, this encourages a young autistic person to mask whether they are diagnosed or not. And so what I found was that from a young age, I was having to do constant energy accounting because the level of masking I was having to do to survive was incredible. And truth be told, it didn't work anyway. Now, when we think about energy accounting for autistic people, what we're thinking about is something that people call spoon theory. Spoon theory talks about cognitive resources, our psychological energy, as if we have an allotted number of spoons per day, with spoons being units of energy. And every time we use a spoon on an activity, that's less spoons for activities later. So, what I found was from my early teens forwards, I was having to do a lot of energy accounting. Do I have the energy to do this activity and hide who I am at the same time? And this resulted in me during my formative years and into my early adulthood experiencing really quite intense burnout. And I went through a lot of different crises, including addiction and psychosis, as a young adult. And I think this is really significant because what we have to think about is that our young people, whether they're diagnosed autistic or not, are being set up to enter adulthood in a state of distress because society does not accommodate us. It wants us to be something different from who we are. Undiagnosed autistic people, especially, grow up being told that who they are is not enough, that they need to be something more than who they are. And obviously, this isn't true. Who we are is enough. But we live in a world where people are encouraged to accept the neuronormative values of our civilization rather than embrace the diversity of human minds. And so, what it really says to me is when we think about autistic people and why so many of us seem to be in crisis all the time or under some great distress, we have to look at the fact that we have lived our lives trying to survive in a world that is constantly trying to fix us, whether we needed fixing or not, which, by the way, we don't need fixing. So I hope this gives you some insight into why autistic people have the experiences that they do. I hope it helps you understand a bit more what it's like to be an undiagnosed autistic person. And certainly, I would say, life can get easier later on when we've got a diagnosis and we're more able to curate our environment. But for so many of us, we don't get that opportunity. So, one thing I want people to take away from this video is please take the opportunity to afford autistic people, whether they're diagnosed or not. Please take the time to afford them some space to be who they are and don't make them feel like they have to be anything else.